Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Aaron Salzberg. I'm the director of the Water Institute at the University of North Carolina, and it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the first session in our seminar series titled Informing the 2023 Political Agenda Through Science. It's our hope that 2023 will be a transformational year in water, as the UN hosts the first high-level event on water within the UN for almost 50 years. It's really going to be a unique event. The goal of this seminar series is to inform this 2023 policy discussions on water and sanitation with the latest science and evidence from across the water sector. We've learned a lot over the past year. Reports on the state of the world's water, sanitation, and hygiene by the UN have pointed out important gaps in our efforts to achieve universal access to safe drinking water and sanitation. Studies by the World Bank and others have identified governance and management reforms that can work to achieve results at scale. And as many of you know, the next year will see a number of new technologies deployed that will fundamentally change our ability to monitor and measure the state of our water resources. So a lot's happening. Our goal through these sessions is to bring these developments to the policymakers so that sound policies can be based on sound science. And to start us off, we brought together the top abstracts selected for this section that highlight some of these developments and opportunities to approach water differently and to achieve results at scale. So I'd like to now turn it over to Alice Aureli, our moderator for the session.
Thank you very much, Aaron. My name is Alice Aureli. I work at the UNESCO at the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program. That is one of the UN intergovernmental programs related to water resources. I have the pleasure to moderate this session. We have 7 very much interesting presentations. 7 experts from different horizons. The session is shared in 3 main topics, one much more related to WASH, water and sanitation, the second on water resource management and governance, and the third on advancing services and observations. How these science that is ready to be applied, to be used, will serve to inform policy and to have a better water sector transformation and improving the water capacity around the globe. I would like then to start presenting the first 2 speakers. The first speaker on our WASH segment is Mr. Cristo Perez Seren from the Stockholm Environment Institute. Is a research assistant in the SEI Institute, mainly related to the looking at Latin American studies. And he will let us know about the importance of and how to build a political will to ensure water. And he has spotted a country that is Bolivia. What robust and how to build together robust decision support framework in order to improve at city level the water supply and water management. Mr. Seren, the floor is yours, please.
Hello everyone, thanks for watching this video. My name is Cristo Perez. I'm a water researcher at the Stockholm Environment Institute, and I'm here today to share how we have been contributing in building political will to ensure water for all in southern Bolivia. This is a project we have been involved for the past 2 years, so we hope you find interesting. Water is at the core of the Bolivian constitution. That's why access to water is a right in this nation. However, cities like Villa Imperial de Potosí are struggling to ensure water security. For example, currently there are people without access to safe and reliable water for domestic use. with a coverage at only 75 to 90%. This means that capital cities like this one are lagging behind the achievement of the SDG 6 on water and sanitation for the 2030 agenda. If nothing changes, the business as usual scenario seems to be very discouraging. The current situation is likely to get worse in the future given the fact that the population is growing and the two water supply systems are vulnerable to climate change. Under this context, we develop a framework to provide stakeholders and policymakers with science-based tools for them to secure current and future water security for all. This approach allows stakeholders to create a set of coherent possible futures in order to identify common opportunities, potential compromises, and robust strategy for water security. This was built from a river basin perspective. The participatory decision-making model aims to address how local decisions may impact on the river basin. So stakeholders may work each other's interests. In this case, the institutional framework is consisting of the local and regional authorities, the water utility of Potosi, and farmers' representatives. This framework comprises three main pillars going clockwise. First, we see the decision panel where scenarios based on strategies are run. In this case, we develop some supply, demand, and source water protection alternatives, and here are some examples. Then we move to the analytical tools where scenarios based on the strategies are run. And finally, we identify the visualization board where members of the institutional framework may learn about the performance and results of the decision package taken. In this case, we develop some indicators related with water security in cities and crop fields downstreams. In order to assess the different scenarios, we develop a representation of the urban water system of Potosi City, and then we project it to the future under a stress scenario. Here are some of the findings discussed by stakeholders. This type of reports allows to assess the performance of potential interventions against reference scenarios according to the selected indicator. Dots represents the performance of the scenarios in the city of Potosi. Here, domestic water security improves as long as the strategy moves to the top left as well as reduces its area. Here we can see that scenarios related with climate change and supply-driven alternatives has the larger areas. In turns, water security in crops also improves as long as the alternatives reduces its areas and shifts top to the left. Here we can see that strategies involving new supply sources performs poorly in crop water security, and non-conventional alternatives like wastewater reuse becomes an important solution in this water scarce area of Bolivia. So our main message from this experience are the following. First, that traditional supply-driven alternatives tend to increase inner and outer basin water conflicts. Second, the local interventions should be the result of accurate decisions amongst institutions as they have implications at basin scales. And third, the stakeholders and policymakers are encouraged to work out their interests and understand that there are trade-offs between workable alternatives and their own desirable goals. This is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cristo Perez Seren. It's a very much interesting to see how definitely one of the key issue is the unclear sharing of responsibility amongst regional and local authorities, and of course the inter-basin diversions, and I mean how conflicts can compromise, of course, actions. We will have the possibility to talk during the panel more on this. I will then ask Mr. Fazekas, I'm sorry for my pronunciations. Mr. Milahi Fazekas is assistant professor at the Central European University at the Department of Public Policy in Hungary. And he will let us know about water and sanitation sector integrity risk index in a world where in this moment we know that access to water for all is still very much lagging behind. Please, we are listening to the one who is presenting. There is a group of writers for this paper. The authors are Mr. Fazekas, co-authors Mr. Alakulov and Dr. Alfredo Hernandez Sanchez. Please, the floor.
Hello, my name is Alfredo Hernandez, and I will present the Water and Sanitation Integrity Risk Index, which was developed in collaboration with Mihaly Fazekas from the Central European University and Umarbek Alakulov from the Water Integrity Network. First, I will talk about the design of this index. The index is a data-driven composite indicator that seeks to measure corruption in the water and sanitation sector. The purpose of this index is to provide policymakers, such as yourselves, with tools to effectively monitor real-time development in the sector, specifically when it comes to corruption. It seeks to provide an objective measure of integrity risks at the city level, which contrasts with existing approaches such as the Corruption Perception Index, which focuses on larger geographical areas, such as countries, and of perceptions of corruption. To this effect, we employ big data methods alongside administrative data, alongside survey data that we collect in collaboration with grassroots organizations. This allows us to develop a comprehensive, actionable, and scalable index. The goal of this index, or WERI for its acronym, is to provide a replicable, transparent, and scalable tool which allows us to compare corruption risks across cities and over time. The index is based on a conceptual framework in which government spending, namely procurement, is divided into 3 pillars, alongside with data on pipelines and direct experiences with corruption from the general public. We have identified 3 main pillars of integrity in the water and sanitation sector. The first being public investment projects, the second being recurring spending on supporting ongoing operations, such as purchasing computers for water utilities, and the third one is concerned with client utility interactions. This goes from paying bills to setting up a water connection. Most of the data that goes into this index comes from public procurement contracts, which are taken from national databases on the country level, and it is based on proxies of corruption that we derive from these databases. We standardize each component of integrity risk, in which 0 means the lowest level of integrity and 100 means the highest level of integrity. And we calculate the weight of each of these 3 pillars based on data availability. For pillars in which we have more data, the weight will be more, and for pillars for which we have less, the weight of that pillar will be lower in the composite index. We have conducted WERI on several countries and several cities across the world. Here we see the results in which we can compare the results from countries like Bangladesh, Kenya, Peru, as well as countries included in a preliminary pilot study, which have a broad geographic range that goes from Asunción, Paraguay, Hungary, to Cluj-Napoca in Romania, and Batumi in Georgia. Similarly, in the latest iteration of WERI, we have collaborated with grassroots organizations in Peru to develop a stakeholder survey in which we capture direct experiences of corruption of relevant stakeholders in two cities, namely Lima and Arequipa. In this slide, we see the results and we see the comparison of Peru over time. Finally, WERI is a powerful tool to measure integrity in the water and sanitation sector, and it seeks to combine a robust methodological framework with grassroots knowledge of specific cases. Working together with local organizations can improve the robustness of WERI, as is with the example of Peru and survey data, though technical training and methodological discussions with partner organizations will help us further achieve these goals. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez. Definitely, in lack of integrity and corruption is one of the main obstacles when this happens to sustainable water resource management at different level. And the index you have presented is definitely of great interest. And not only that, in many regions of the world, a lack of integrity and corruption is also an obstacle to attract international cooperation. So the way how we can track these and put the decision making, the policy making with a tool that help them to identify this kind of problems, of course, it's of great use. Well, now the second topic, all topics are more or less interrelated, but I mean for strategy of this session, we have the second topic called to look at water resource management and governance. And we have with us Dr. Sarah Young from the Northwestern University. She is Associated Professor of Anthropology and Global Health at the Northwest University in Evanston, Illinois, in United States. And we will listen to you very carefully because it's really interesting what you will tell us in this moment. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm here today to talk with you about how we can bring a really important voice to the water sector. The human voice. And we can do so with a tool that's easy to understand, quick to implement, and it's not even expensive. So we all agree that good governance leaves no one behind. This applies to the SDGs, of course, but it applies to any state or community governance as well. To know who's left behind, we need data. But current global water indicators don't tell us specifically who's being left behind. This was called out in the high-level panel report of 2018, where they talked about how you can't manage what you can't measure, but major gaps exist. And I know this for a fact from firsthand experience. So in 2013, a large grant from the National Institutes of Health to study women's health during pregnancy. And I wanted to measure how Kenyan women experienced water access and use. But the common indicators, so made this woman, for example, and I'm happy to talk to her in the question about her in the question and answer session, made her seem water insecure. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. When I got to the data to see how water indicators, what they measure, turns out that experiences weren't usually regarded. So water availability, that's very well measured. And if we looked at her, the water available to her, Lake Victoria was right there. Turns out access is another common indicator, the JMP drinking water ladder access being prime example. She had infrastructure right there, but it turns out her mother-in-law wasn't letting her use that sim tank. We're also good at measuring the safety of water. But what seemed to be missing from the literature that I found was this holistic measure of access, use, and stability across time. It really brought to life what lived experiences looked like. And this surprised me because food insecurity is measured based on experiences. That's the basis of SDG 2.1.2. And I thought the food insecurity scale needed a sister scale. And we therefore created the Water Insecurity Experiences Scales. It was a large effort across many disciplines, institutions, time zones. What we did was we identified 30 candidate items and then stress tested them across all kinds of settings, these ones pictured here, and through a combination of blood, sweat, tears, and statistics. We landed on 12 items. So the scale takes 3 minutes and it asks people about kind of universal experiences in the last 4 weeks, or there's also a version that asks about the last year. If you've worried about water, never, then you get a 0. If you are often or always angry about your water situation, you get a 3. 12 times 3 is 36, and it takes just 3 minutes to administer. And there's even a short version that takes just 1 minute. And so now we can see who's being left behind. Here's a glimpse of some of the data. These are nationally representative data from Egypt. And here are the 12, these are IWIs, individual water insecurity experience questions. And based on the cutoff we developed, about a quarter of Egyptians are water insecure. And it tells us a lot. It also tells us a different picture than what the drinking water ladder access data tell us, which would be that less than 1% of Egyptians have worse than basic drinking water access. So this is a complementary indicator to JMP, and there's a policy brief available at the UNC Water Institute that talks about this at length. We wrote this with the JMP guys. This data also tells us more than just how water insecure is the country. It tells us who. As we can see that 33% of women are water insecure versus 23% of men. We can see that water insecurity is not unique to rural settings, but it's also quite common in urban settings. So the WISE scales have now been implemented in many countries by many organizations. USAID is using it in their Feed the Future midline evaluations. The government of Mexico just finished implementation in the National Health and Nutrition Survey. It's fascinating. UNICEF has piloted it in Mongolia and on some other places. And one of the reasons why I think the scale has been taken up is because it can, so broadly, is because it can be used at multiple levels. So we can use it to look at the prevalence within a country or a state. We can also use it to look at the impact of building boreholes. We don't have to just count boreholes anymore. We can see the human impact. Oxfam has done that. We can also understand the consequences of well-being when we measure it at the level of the individual. And for these reasons, I would submit to you that the WISE scales are useful for making decisions about investment, advocacy, and for policymaking. Now, we have data from 48 or so low and middle income countries, but we need data on all of the countries, for all of the world, to have truly robust policy and as a global public good. And so for that, I would ask you to think about in bringing this human voice to any of the water policy that you are working on developing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Human voice, the who is experiencing water insecurity. But let's also think that we, the scientists, we should do more. There is definitely a gap, a real lack of cooperation and dialogue between social science and engineering, and policymakers at national or at global level. Decision makers are mainly, when taking the one who takes decision on water resource management and allocation, these are engineers. And engineers have no vocabulary. I mean, really, the CV are completely in silos. So this is definitely something that we should learn as also lessons from what you have just presented to us. Then we will continue the debate in the panel discussions for sure. I would like now to give the floor to Miss Heather Cooley from the Pacific Institute in the United States. Miss Cooley is a water program director in the Pacific Institute since 2004. And she will let us know a little bit about some innovative strategies for simultaneous meeting water, energy, and climate goals. Heather, the floor is yours.
My name is Heather Cooley, and I'm Director of Research with the Pacific Institute, a global research and policy organization focused on advancing water sustainability and resilient solutions. Today, I will present findings from 2 recent Pacific Institute studies that can inform water, energy, and climate policy. Pressures on water resources are intensifying in communities around the world. This is driven by a variety of factors: population growth, pollution, and increasingly the impacts of climate change. In response, communities are considering more energy-intensive water supply options, threatening to increase water's energy and greenhouse gas footprints. 2 recent Pacific Institute studies can shine light on these issues. The first quantifies the technical potential to expand urban water efficiency, water reuse, and stormwater capture. The second estimates the energy and greenhouse gas footprints of urban and agricultural water sectors under various future water scenarios. These studies use California as a case study, but the methodology and the findings are relevant for communities around the world. California has made considerable progress in diversifying its water supply portfolio and reducing demand through efficiency improvements. In fact, the state has successfully decoupled water use and growth. This figure shows water use, population, and gross state product from 1967. In the 1960s and 70s, water use increased at about the same rate as population, but starting in about 1980, water use has remained relatively flat while the population and the economy continued to grow. Despite this progress, water use exceeds the available supply, as evidenced by persistent groundwater overdraft and declining ecosystem health, and climate change threatens to exacerbate these challenges. We examined additional opportunities to reduce water demand through efficiency improvements and diversify water supplies using existing technologies and practices. We find that water efficiency could reduce urban water demand by 30 to 48%, despite the previous improvements. We find additional opportunities for reuse and stormwater capture. California currently reuses about 0.9 cubic kilometers of recycled water each year, and we find there's an opportunity to triple current water reuse levels. Likewise, we can greatly expand stormwater capture opportunities and in fact have identified up to 3.7 cubic kilometers of stormwater that could be captured in a wet year. These strategies can reduce drought pressures and build long-term water resilience. For the second study, we examined the energy and greenhouse gas footprints associated with urban and agricultural water sectors. Here, I'm only going to talk about the results for the urban sector, because while agriculture in California uses 4 times as much water as the urban areas, the water-related energy use is 9 times greater in urban areas, and the water-related greenhouse gas emissions are also 9 times higher. Under a business as usual scenario, as shown on the left, population growth would increase urban water demand and water-related energy use by more than 40%. Despite policies in place to decarbonize the electricity grid, we find that water-related greenhouse gas emissions would increase by about 2%. Alternatively, as shown on the right, comprehensive urban water efficiency measures would reduce future water demand and water-related energy use by about 17%. Thus, efficiency coupled with decarbonization of the grid could effectively reduce water-related greenhouse gas emissions by about 40%. Case studies that we included in this analysis also indicated that in some areas, replacing imported water with more local supplies, using, for example, water reuse and stormwater capture, could further reduce energy use and associated greenhouse gas emissions. We conclude that we have significant opportunities and potential to expand urban water efficiency, water reuse, and stormwater capture. Without these measures, water-related carbon emissions are likely to spike in the coming years. For California and the global community more broadly, water can and must play an integral role in meeting energy and climate goals. This research supports the need for more energy and greenhouse gas conscious water policies to reduce the energy and greenhouse gas emissions associated with the end use of water, as well as the provision of water and wastewater services. There's also a need for greater collaboration between the water and energy sectors, both in planning and the implementation of programs and policies. If you're interested in learning more about these and other studies, please visit our website. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Heather. Again, a gap of communications, a communication between two sectors, the water sector and the energy sectors. So there is a lot to do in this sense, as we heard already from social science and the water science gaps. And definitely the big question for 2023 for the Minister of Water Resources next year and in the UN in New York will be how to put together water efficiency in order to cope with the population growth and food production. So the agriculture sector that again doesn't talk very much with the water supply and an urban sector. We have the next presentations by Madame Louise Kennedy from the ARUPS Water Advisory Team in the United Kingdom. She will tell us about how creating an enabling environment for blue-green thinking in water resilience. Louise, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining today. My name is Louise Kennedy, and today I will be providing an introduction into our work on using an evidence-based approach to creating an enabling environment for water resilience governance. The focus of my presentation is the city water resilience approach and its adaptation for use in different contexts around the world. Global water crises, from flooding to drought, are one of the biggest threats facing the planet over the next decade. The city water resilience approach helps cities build the capacity of their urban water systems and the water environment to endure, adapt, and transform in the face of new challenges. The CWRA helps cities to formulate a clear vision of what urban water resilience means to them and provides a plan for prioritizing key actions for enhancing resilience. It provides detailed expert and stakeholder input to understand the water system and the shocks and stresses they face. It diagnoses water resilience vulnerabilities using a series of qualitative and quantitative indicators, provides an opportunity for knowledge sharing and awareness raising across a diverse range of stakeholders, enables stakeholders and decision makers to develop a plan for joint action, investment and partnership, and provides co-benefits across other sectors. The CWRA is a globally applicable framework built on principles that can be implemented in any context that has now been tested in 16 cities around the world. These cities were chosen to reflect a range of geographies and challenges, different shocks and stresses, and governance models to inform a truly global framework. Different cities have different capacities, and the opportunities for implementing the CWRA will vary between contexts. The full wheel of sub-goals was developed and tested on high and middle income countries, and so it was envisaged that not all sub-goals would be suitable for fragile or low income contexts. However, the value in the CWRA is the holistic approach it encourages when evaluating city systems. A subset of goals was then needed to account for different capabilities while still allowing for holistic evaluation of the system. 4 levels of the CWRA, as well as the original wheel, were determined, and for each level, a subset of indicators was selected. These subsets started with essential provision of WASH, where a city needs to be able to cope with recent urban growth and current demand. At this level, a city aspires to have spare capacity in urban systems and minimal issues with water supply shortages and sanitation provision. At the other end of the spectrum, you have regenerative, which uses all of the original sub-goals, and the city is aspiring to utilize new and innovative technology and takes a holistic approach to evaluating the urban water system. These selected indicators allow us to prioritize focus areas for each city while identifying opportunities and challenges around urban water resilience. Over the last 3 years, we've worked in 6 very different contexts in South Africa, Rwanda, Ethiopia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. On the surface, similarities between each city might not be apparent. However, the need to address the most vulnerable populations in each city was a primary driver. Commonalities between the cities included their risk profiles, including their susceptibility to flooding or drought, social and economic growth factors, including high unemployment and high levels of poverty, combined with population growth and increasing housing demand, as well as being economic centers for their region. The main outcome from undertaking a resilience assessment in each city is an action plan. For each city, we developed an evidence-based set of actions with some examples shown on the slide, including the development of an adaptive master plan or a decision support system. However, from all contexts, we came away with some key takeaways. Participation, especially for underserved or vulnerable communities, helps us to gain a shared understanding of the challenges and build a foundation for shared action plans. Without the engagement of vulnerable communities, we cannot ensure that actions are developed with the community instead of for them. Complex governance across catchments with overlap or gaps in responsibilities between agencies is a key issue, and engaging closely with city champions to ensure a good understanding of the basin dynamics is hugely important. In many cases, plans and strategies may be in place, but the challenge is in shifting to implement these. There is a need for collaborative working from different city and federal agencies to understand how implementation can be best facilitated. Flooding and other water-related shocks and stresses are a challenge for cities, but we need to be able to reframe these as an opportunity, particularly around livelihoods. Demonstrating the link between job creation and water resilience is key. Finally, the increased need for workers around water resilience means that capacity building with academic partners and city agency, as well as skills development, is a crucial opportunity for cities to capitalize on. Finally, I will leave you with this quote from our partners at the Living with Water Partnership in the UK. The need to address water challenges is greater than ever, but so is the opportunity to rediscover the positive role of water, its potential to shape a successful, resilient, and sustainable city. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. We have a problem. I think Louise should open her screen in order to have her video and be able to see her. I hope this will be adjusted quite soon. Again, Louise, from the presentation, so there is oh, okay, fine. As I said, again, from the presentation from Louise, we have another gap of collaborations. And I think this is a leitmotif that is coming around, overlap and gaps in responsibilities between agencies at the city level. That definitely the PWRA, so the city water resilience approach, is useful. The issue is how to make good use and how to use and to share the possibility of these with a more larger public. Well, then the third topic of this session, and Luis, we will have definitely a possibility to talk during the panel discussion. So the third topic of this session is more related to some advanced services, observations, innovation in technology out of space, for example, and about to something that is very dear to my heart, that is groundwater. So I would like to ask Dr. Christian Tottrup from the DHI group in Denmark. He's the senior advisor of the DHI group to give his presentation and tell us about a new era for satellite-based surface water monitoring. Christian?
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes,
is it fine? Okay, thank you. Yes, hello everybody. My name is Christian Tottrup, and as said, I'm a senior advisor at DSI, water expert consultancy based in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I will do this talk today about the latest status on satellite-based surface water monitoring. So inland freshwater resources are affected by climate change as well as increasing demands for food production, energy, and water. So there's a need to monitor these resources at both national, regional, and global levels to understand the vulnerability to change and ensure sustainable management. Unfortunately, during the last decades, we have seen a steady decline in situ hydrological monitoring, and satellite Earth observation is now emerging as an essential tool for large-scale monitoring of water resources. Perhaps one good example of this situation is how satellite data is serving the SDGs, more particular SDG 661, which is an indicator designed to measure changes in the extent of freshwater ecosystems over time. Now, back in 2017, when UNEP as a custodian agency was asking countries to provide data on the state and trend of the freshwaters, only a few countries was actually able to send any data, and the data received was of poor spatial and temporal coverage. So that was really a demonstration that there was a significant global data gap. So during the next data drive, UNEP was looking into how they could solve this issue, and they turned to partners, particularly the space agencies, ESA, NASA, and JAXA, and tech partners like Google and the Joint Research Center, in order to explore how to benefit from Earth observation data as a source for providing information about freshwater at a global scale. And so this turned out quite successfully, and today, at this point, the Global Surface Water Explorer dataset produced by the Joint Research Center and processed in the Google Earth Engine is now used to report on trends in rivers, lakes, and reservoirs globally. So while this global surface water data set is really the benchmark product for analyzing global long-term water trends, it's still a global data set, and they tend to have some local and regional biases. For example, the data is in a 30-meter resolution, but some research is indicating that 10 to 15% of global water is actually mixed with land at this resolution. Therefore, a recent study performed a systematic comparison of the latest satellite-based approaches for surface water mapping, and clearly demonstrating that more details and better seasonal characterization can be achieved when using a combination of optical and SAR data, and from the latest generations of satellites, which is provided open and free and available for any place on Earth in 10-meter resolution. And just as an evidence from what is happening when you go for a 30-meter product to a 10-meter product, you can clearly see here the added details as being captured. Now, with global satellite data now available in high resolution, the volume of data is also growing exponentially. And that means we need to look at new efficient ways to exploit these big data. So instead of the downloading and processing data locally, we need to bring the users to the data. that is providing users with cloud-based hardware and software infrastructure located in the same physical or virtual location as the satellite data. And ultimately also ensuring a seamless integration with local knowledge and local data to ensure optimized user-generated results. Now, this whole, you can say, cloud technology has typically been, or historically been dominated by some of the US tech giants as Google and Amazon, but many more options is now becoming available. And the challenge is really to make the community aware of these platforms and tools and via practical guidelines illustrate how to get started in terms of using satellite data for water resource monitoring. So this is basically the conclusion, our outlook that trying to set here is that, I mean, regular and systematic satellite data provides a very efficient tool for monitoring and statistical reporting and analyzing the status of inland waters. And combined with the advances we now have in the technical infrastructure for big data analysis, it's really within the possibility of countries to implement satellite-based surface water monitoring systems. And this is essentially what this current project, the World Water Project, is trying to do. It's a large application project funded by the European Space Agency, which is ultimately aiming at empowering countries with the data and tools to better monitor the water resources and report on the global water agenda. It's very much ongoing and in development, and the hope is by end of this year, the outcome that is an open source toolbox, some cloud processing facilities, a data analytics portal is going to be available for the community and hopefully help to, you can say, ease the adaptation of satellite data by countries to monitor the water resources. And with this, I'm gonna stop.
Thank you so much, Christian. Well, make the community aware. So how to communicate the science, that science evidence matter, how to make these used, and well, then what is the main obstacles that these new technologies remain unused, and of course open sources, open access to data and to science. This is what I'm learning from you now. The last presentation, it is about improving drill success rates in data-sparse regions with geophysics. And it is presented by Professor Anders West Christiansen. I hope I pronounce it correctly, from the Aarhus University in Denmark. He's associate professor with the hydrogeophysics group at the Aarhus University.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'll dive right into it. I will be happy to present to you the work that we've been doing in building a new and novel instrument in order to locate groundwater resources to limit the risk of failed drilling. So I'll dive right into it and basically skip the fact that there is a water stress. I think that's well known by now, but I will say that groundwater is definitely part of the solution here, in the sense that we know that groundwater resources have a low risk of contamination, and they are also often present in regions without surface water resources, and they are quite often also accessible in dry seasons. So we need to drill down to reach these groundwater resources. And traditionally, what has been done when people try to locate the resources is that they build some sort of simple understanding of the subsurface by looking at, for instance, topography, vegetation patterns, known springs on the surface, and so on. And then you would drill and hope for the best. That's a classic approach. And with that, depending on where you are, it's a 10 to 30% chance, I would say, that you actually find some water. So what we're proposing here is basically a little bit similar to what you can experience in the hospital. Say you have a scan, some sort of a CT scanner in this case, and that will provide you an image of, say, your knee, and that's an image that can be used by the surgeon before any procedure to make sure that the surgeon or the surgery is done in the best and most efficient way. So it's a little bit similar what we're doing here. We have a geophysical instrument, and with that geophysical instrument, we run on the surface non-intrusively, and we build 3D detailed images of the subsurface down to maybe 100 meters depth. So I hope that this video will play nicely, but otherwise I think you can just see the images. This is the instrument in action. It's easy to mobilize. It maps up to maybe 100 hectares per day, or depending on terrain, it could also be 75 or more kilometers. And as I said, it scans down to maybe 100 meters depth. So in other words, what we're doing here is basically obtaining images. They are electrical images, but they're then translated into geological properties, say where are the sand, where are the clay, where is it more likely that we have groundwater resources to look for. So I'll show to you just the two examples from actual mapping campaigns that we have carried out in Africa. The first one here from South Africa, you can see the blue lines is where we have mapped, and the red line is then an about 3 kilometer long profile at more than 100 meters depth, where you can see I've just drawn on top the interpretation of the unit. So there's some sandstone and there's some shales. And based on this, it was basically decided that the best place to drill would be just on the contact between here, the sandstones and the shales. And this would not have been possible without this image. As you can see, maybe from the surface expression, there's nothing to be seen in the topography of this profile that would indicate that there is a difference at depth. So the other example that I'll just briefly show you is from Ethiopia and the outskirts of a refugee camp, where again, the black lines are where we've mapped, and the red line is the profile you see to the right. And based on this, two promising drill targets were identified. They're not yet drilled, but they were identified based on these images. And lastly, I'll just leave you with this quote from Will Furlong from Water Mission, saying, "This new borehole is the most prolific, many thanks to TTEM, and was the most difficult that we have ever completed. Now that it's completed and we know how much water is available, we can design the system to provide safe water for a population of 30,000 people in Makara." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anders. So very clear and to the point. And definitely, we all know the importance of well fitting process for successful drilling and outcomes. The Dakar World Water Forum this year in March, it came across the message that, of course, in Africa, there is a huge capacity, groundwater resource capacity, but there are no studies, no detailed studies, no detailed explorations, and of course, we should avoid that pumping, wild pumping starts, and funds are definitely put in the garbage if we don't have a well-fitting process studies and exploration. So definitely this is a big question for all hydrogeologists, and how to communicate that to decision makers, that if you don't have a correct evaluation and assessment of groundwater resources, you can have a huge amount of groundwater resources, but these will not serve the purpose of sustainable development. Fine, we have here the possibility to have a more exchange, direct exchange between all of us. I would like to make one question to all of you, the same, and then maybe to go more in detail about your presentations. I mean, in few seconds, if you are next year at UN Intergovernmental Conference, the possibility to talk with ministers of water resources on the base of your experience, your knowledge, your projects, what you would like to tell them, what message and what request. They have to take commitments next year. You know, this is the decision from this conference. That is only the second one. You can imagine the difficulty this means if you have to wait more than 40 years to have the second intergovernmental conference on water resources. These tell you immediately that countries, of course, have a certain difficulty to sit together about taking decision at global and regional level on water resources. So if you would be able to talk to them and say, you have to take this commitment that is very much related to support my field of study that we have proved is of crucial use for you, for taking informed decision. Cristo Perez, Mr. Cristo Perez Seren, I start with you. 1 second, 2 seconds, half a minute. What is your message to 2023, this high-level policymaker and decision makers? For Latin America in particular, I suppose.
Yeah, I need to talk from my context. Basically, more cooperation between institutions, capacity building is required in order to capture the knowledge that we are creating.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Well, for Mr. Fernandez, for your field of studies, and Alfredo Hernandez, not Fernandez, Hernandez, from your field of studies, what is your message?
I would say that it is very important to get the people that are going to be most affected by whatever policy or whatever metric involved. In this case, by allowing the people or organizations in Peru who helped us collect the survey data to take ownership and learn more about the index, I think that increases his chances of success. I don't know if Umerbek, you want to add something?
Yes, sure. My message would be the scientific method has progressed enough to actually measure and monitor corruption risks. So it's only a matter of having political will to do something about the issue of corruption and preventing it from hampering the achievement of SDG 6.
So the message is you don't have any excuse anymore. You have the tools to do it, okay? And
correct.
So you have to do it. And we are recording this session, so it will go around. So the message is clear. Yes, we hope so. Sarah.
Hi.
You.
Yep. So we all agree that no one should be left behind in terms of water security. Everyone should be. The thing is, we don't know who's being left behind if we're only measuring physical water availability or infrastructure. So we need data on human experiences of water insecurity that parallels that which we have for food insecurity. And it's a small investment to measure it globally. It's only about $1.5 million. We should have that as data as a global public good to make sure that our policies are actually being impactful.
Yeah, I mean, peanuts for a few weapons. Really peanuts. And you have already told us something that, in the UN, we definitely know, but we don't go through that, of course, water insecurity, there is the 23% boys and 33% ladies. And these great lady that you met in Kenya that you show us, maybe you will tell us more about her. But also on gender studies, and we are very lacking behind. We are not involving this component very much. Heather.
Yes, thank you. I think the key message and the key takeaway is that water can and must play an integral role in meeting energy and climate goals. We have to better think about these policies together, or else we will fail to meet all of our goals collectively.
Thank you. Message taken. Louise.
I would say the importance of city level action when considering what a country can contribute, and coordination between city level authorities, city level entities, and those at a federal level.
difficulty in cross-sectoral coordination and cooperation when you are in a city level. And of course, the study you have presented is providing examples that advancement can be made. Christian.
Yes, so if I'm talking to countries and if not already using Earth observation data for water resource monitoring, I would like to know what are the main obstacles for embracing the technology. Is it lack of awareness, short in human capacity? Is it institutional barriers, financial issues? Yeah, what are the key stopping points?
Now, what are the obstacles? What are the obstacles? Most probably, I think it came from the discussion is that communication gap. These tools exist, but the information doesn't reach the decision makers, the policy makers, who are now routine going on business as usual. So it's a difficulty at the institutional level then to change, to transform, to include new methods of governing water resources at a different level. So I think there is definitely a lot of work to be done on how to communicate that these tools exist. Also in a very advanced country like France, Italy, Germany, United States, I think things are not superb. So there is, I think, much to be done at also regional and local level in countries, even in the European region. And last but not least, Anders, groundwater.
Yeah, I think groundwater is actually mainly overlooked in many of these discussions, or often is at least, and especially the link between surface water and groundwater, because one problem in cities, as we heard, is stormwater that floods the cities. And I think a much deeper integration of these things so that we can reutilize the stormwater, maybe pile it up and have it reinfiltrate to form new groundwater. Then we solve one problem in one place and we built some new groundwater resources in other places. So this is something that I would really like to see pursued. I think also what I see is that there is really a high, it's difficult to get new approaches in the policy making system. There is sort of a tendency to stick with old or traditional aspects or ways of doing things. And I don't know how to crack that nut, but that would be really good to sort of not look back, but look forward instead in many cases.
Definitely. I mean, Christian was talking about the SDG 6 indicator framework, the work that UNEP, UNESCO, UNEC, I mean, 7 UN agencies are doing in monitoring the SDG 6 indicators. It's definitely a must, I would say. It's the first time that we are all working together, 7 agencies fully working together with directly member states. And I think in the next year, we will be able to have more evidence of when the gaps at regional and national level on the different indicators. This year, you know, Anders, and you know everybody, this year was the World Water Day was devoted to groundwater, making the invisible visible. And all the UN campaign, there is a UN Water Task Force. We are all working together in order to make groundwater more visible. Groundwater for urban supply, groundwater for ecosystem, groundwater for cooperation, transboundary groundwater, and the corruption, and what you don't see, and when you can cheat on what you cannot see. Of course, the corruptions and integrity is a crucial issue. And of course, out of space can help a lot when you have these large areas like in Africa, where it's very much difficult to go on site for lack of capacity of techniques and experts and human capacity as a number, not as intellectual, but really as a number. Well, Joisa and Aaron and Panhei and friends, maybe I can stop here and we go to the conclusion. So what do you suggest, Joisa?
Okay, so great moderation, Alici. So for this initial session, we have received more than 50 abstracts. Presenters today have shown us actionable recent developments in science. The presentations encompass recent advances in applied research that can inform discussions around the science and feed into the policy making. Session 1, to be held online on August 25th, will convene representatives from institutional science organizations such as UNICEF, the World Bank, WMO, to discuss some of the research they have been involved in over the last year that is also relevant to policymaking. Session 2 will take place in Stockholm on the 1st of September. The session will reunite people working on the interface of science and policymaking that are able to inform senior leaders about science priorities. And lastly, the final session will gather policymakers who will participate in the 2023 high-level events about how the water community can advance some of these scientific interests within the UN system. What is our idea of success through this sequence of sessions? It is to emphasize that sound policies can be designed, implemented, monitored, and its outcomes evaluated through science, advances, and evidence. Thank you, Penny, for coordinating the session and guiding us through this whole process. Thank you, Alici and Aaron and the presenters, and also to our partners, UNESCO, WaterAid, the World Bank, WMO, and IWRM. Thank you very much. See you soon.